he was telling me, that's how they worked. They
Mm.
wrote a song and in a half an hour. The next day went in, they recorded it.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of bands worked then. Then bands got into the excesses in the 70s and 80s, and then,
Mm.
Fleetwood Mac Tusk, where they spent 2 years on it.
Really.
And then, so I think it's good to see bands going back to that immediacy.
I think it's also to be open. It's one of the things that we do work very well. We do work best when we're quick. But for instance, a track like Fake Plastic Trees, Tom basically it was a new way of working for us. Tom did this amazing vocal with an acoustic guitar one night, and we had to build the track up around it, and we had to embellish the track, and everything put on couldn't be mediocre or average. Everything had to enhance the track. And that took about 3 to 4 months to actually, coming back to it. And it wasn't until the final mix by Sean Slade, Paul Caldery, who produced our first album, they mixed this one, that they actually pulled all these different things together, and they sent it back, and it was like, wow, Jesus, this is what it should sound like.
Oh. Now, another song I understand was recorded in kind of an unusual way, Bulletproof, that they just had the tape rolling while the guitars were playing, and then kind of added that into the song. Is that true?
Yeah, well, it was because basically the acoustic guitar, Tom playing acoustic guitar, and the bass and drums had all been down then. The track needed some kind of like effects stuff, I guess, on it, and we were trying. Jonny and I were playing
the old Floyd trick.
Floyd trick, and we were trying to, add some kind of layers and textures to it, and it wasn't really working when the tape was rolling. And so they said, well, we'll stop the tape rolling, and we'll roll the tape, but you won't hear it. Just play oodly funny noises for 3.5 minutes, and do that 4 or 5 times. And we did that, and I remember thinking at the time, bastards, this is never recorded like this before. How are you supposed to do it?
But we ended up with like 6 tracks of all very different colours on them.
Yeah.
That we could fade in and out to change the mood.
That's the kind of song I call a headphone song. It sounds great on the headphones, or at night if you're trying to go to sleep or whatever.
Well, I think that's the thing about this album. Is I remember the first time I only listened to it on headphones really about like a month and a half ago, and it's like, this sounds phenomenal. It sounds really, really good on headphones.
Well, when I knew you guys were coming in, I've been listening to over the past week, and while I was doing my house, glamorous things like my housework and laundry and stuff. And instead of like fading into the background and background music, it kept, the music was there. It wasn't like I was daydreaming over it. I was definitely aware of really, listening to the music. It didn't fade into the background, which...
That's good.
Is a way I gauge of how the songs stand up. Since they're not here, let's talk about some of the other guys. What kind of people are they? What are they like to be with? Since they're not here to defend themselves, I think an obvious first choice will be your brother, Colin.
Right.
There was a quote that Colin said in one of these articles that unlike the Gallaghers, we beat each other up in private and get on well in public, which I thought was brilliant. What kind of person is he like?
He sort of keeps hugging me, doesn't he? And calling me a winner and telling me, you're my brother and you're great, and hugging me and looking at me like a big affectionate dog. Or a little affectionate dog, really. Which is great.
Yeah.
Sort of.
I also, when we're on tour, I share a room with him as well, and he's, it's very difficult to talk about the others because we have known each other and been friends for so long that kind of we all know one's own little idiosyncrasies and put up with them and kind of annoying little habits, but there's an amazing amount of strength there and friendship. And you'd have to be to do tour, and we had 2 weeks off last year, and the rest, yeah. And sometimes you sit there, and I remember I'd been ill. I think it was about 3-4 weeks ago. I just had the flu, and every single day we'd been together, since January 2 this year, January the 2nd. And I sat there at this meal, kind of half joking, but sort of crying into my soup, going, "Oh my God, I spent all my time with you." And I see my girlfriend, like we see our girlfriends so infrequently because they're away or whatever. So it's very difficult because we kind of very tight knit and not willing to let on about.
Well, I did hear about Phil that since he's usually a little bit more quieter than everybody, there was the nickname the Mad Dog, and people were afraid to approach him and thinking, uh-oh, this guy is going to be like really off the edge. And
Yeah, well, it was just our I guess our sense of irony. That's right, that we thought it was funny calling him Mad Dog, and he's not at all. You know, the thing is that Phil is the antithesis of your normal drummer. He's very cerebral. He's very, you know, thoughtful. He's a great drummer, and he's, you know, he's not one to go smashing TV sets through as none of us are, through kind of windows or whatever. You know, that's.
No, I'm disappointed.
Well,
Why?
you know, that's all a bit old hat. You can do much.
That National Enquirer and Sun story wasn't true.
Yeah, no, that's true. We were much more. We prefer to do it with words or.
Yeah, we don't quite see the point in making so much mess that someone paid
That's
a few
right.
dollars an hour will have to come and clear up. It's not like
Yeah.
the manager will have to do it. In these hotels, that someone with a rubbish pay will have to do it. So.
People like Voltaire were much more
Man,
Cutting.
anarchic, on the edge.
anarchic than Keith Moon. Voltaire versus Keith Moon. Which side are you on?
Who'd win?
Tom had a great quote attributed to him. I'd rather be a miserable git than
Yeah.
mod. So kind of sum him up.
Yeah, I think it's kind of that. Yeah, he'd rather be himself or whatever, and you know, do what he does rather than being part of any kind of fashion or trend or scene or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now I guess you probably know him the longest. When you first got together, I heard he recruited you because he thought you
Looked like Morrissey.
Morrissey. Again, I don't know if that's true. But
Yeah,
I heard that.
I did have a bit of a Morrissey and Smiths fixation. I was my teenage years. He sort of, the wonderful thing about the Smiths were that they gave you license, me and my friends license to sit on park benches, you know, sort of reminiscing and talking of unrequited love and, you know, reading books. And yeah, sorry, I've gone off the point a bit there really, but yeah, that's right. I think I was walking across, I've been in various sort of school plays that Tom had been in. I always remember the first time I actually came across Tom sort of musically. I was acting in a play. It was Midsummer Night's Dream, and Tom was doing the music with this other guy, and Tom was playing guitar. And the musicians, it was him and this other guy, were on top of the scaffolding in the school theatre, and it was kind of like a workshop thing going on. And the director, they were kind of like jamming this kind of this muzak, I guess it was, you know, as the play was going on. And the director wanted some kind of form to each scene, you know, and the music was kind of drifting here and there, but it's, you know, it's really good. And I always remember sort of the director sort of, you know, saying, look, what the hell's going on up there? Well, we're on this scene, and Tom yelling down at him, sort of swearing, effing and blinding, sort of like, I don't bloody know where we are, we don't care, we're going to just do our own thing up here and jam. And that was the first kind of time. He was very difficult not to notice at school.
Now, the schooling in England is a little bit different than here, and you know, with headmasters and things like that.
Mm.
So, were all of you a little bit more rebellious than some of your classmates? Would you say, or because the schooling sounds a little bit more strict?
I'm not sure. Yeah, it was stricter, and when there was rebellion, it was fairly wild. There was like contemporary pupils with us who once hijacked a bus, and in fact,
There was a bomb, wasn't there?
there was someone tried to set a bomb next to the main statue in the middle of this park, next to the school. Made a homemade bomb by collecting chemicals every week from chemical lessons over a whole term until I had like a whole bottle full, and laying it next to a statue. And just the other week, the same school, some kids committed an armed robbery on a wine merchant, which is you know, bizarre for this kind of sleepy like town in the middle of Oxfordshire. It's very hard to imagine. So.
In chemistry and physics class, I remember, you know, after lab day, you know, they would check all the chemicals and make sure everything
Yeah.
was still there.
We used to have great magnesium ribbon bonfires, I remember, sort of kind of great big these things would really go.
And then Colin was the next to join the fold. You guys all kind of wound up.
Well,
maybe
Colin and
same
Tom were in
batch.
the same year, and it wasn't Colin, you know, was in, and then, you know, Phil. We did the first gig after Colin had joined, just at like a sixth form birthday party with a drum machine, and it was, you know, it broke down during the first song. after more effing and blinding from Tom, it was decided that night that we needed a drummer, and hence Phil, we knew, and I saw him the next night, I remember. And Jonny was kind of, you were there at all the practices, and sort of, and, you know, within a couple of weeks was playing.
I'm not quite sure how that worked, actually.
Is this true that, you know, you were like saying, oh please, I want to join the band kind of thing, and hanging around the guys, and at 13?
No, you didn't speak for about a year,
No,
did you?
I didn't speak or
You
even had
just
my...
kind of hang out quietly?
And even when I joined the band, I had a keyboard, which because they'd had a previous keyboard player who was sort of into quite loud keyboards in a Genesis kind of way. So I thought, well, the way to stay in this band would be to be very quiet. So I brought a keyboard, played it in the band, but always had the volume on 0, always. No one could hear a note I played.
You're really cunning.
which really worked. They kept saying, "Wow, the keyboards really add something." It's kind of, they kept saying the euphemism they kept coming up with was, they said, "Well, these keyboards sound like you can't hear them, but if you took them away, then you'd notice they were missing," which is excellent because I'd be sat there kind of playing the right chords. You know, I'd be learning how to play the keyboards in between the rehearsals, and I'd get better and better, but. They certainly never heard a note for the first year and a half, 2 years.
Well, if you played harmonica, they heard the
They did hear
harmonica.
that, yeah, but we couldn't put that in every song. So.
Now, at what point did you pick up the guitar? I mean, how did you sneak that in? I mean,
Well,
did
I was-
all of a sudden you were like, guess what? I can also play guitar?
It's sort of, I was kind of doing an apprenticeship with Tom's younger brother. I was in another band at school, and with Tom's equally talented younger brother, and who has got his own band going now. And I'd sort of learn with them and write songs with them, and so I could come on sort of not fully fledged, but not too downy.
Yeah. So, kind of fast forward a little bit. People went off, did their thing, went to college, but the band was still together at all this time.
Yeah.
At what point did your name change from, what was it, on a Friday to a Radiohead?
Wow, you've really done your homework.
Right.
It was just after we'd signed. We were never really happy with the name, and we went through loads of name changes. You know, it didn't make any difference to us because we weren't doing any gigs at the time. So we, on a whim, each vacation holiday, we'd come back and it would be, got a great idea for a name, and all think it was great for about maybe 5-10 minutes, and then it got changed again.
I know this is one of those questions you hate, but how do you come up with on a Friday to a Radiohead?
Obviously not with much thought. I mean,
Was some lager involved in this?
not really. It was just we weren't happy with the name on a Friday, and I think Radiohead is a song by Talking Heads on True Stories, and it was kind of like they were probably actually one of the few bands that we all really liked and admired their diversity and their musicianship, etc., their songwriting.
And they
etc.
finished sort of just as we were starting.
Yeah,
Right,
Seems so
yeah,
annoying.
I forgot all about that.
a nod to the Talking Heads.
And we had the feeling that they sort of did it well. I remember reading this wonderful review of them touring with the Ramones in France, and really annoying the Ramones because they kept getting out of the bus and speaking French to all these people. And the Ramones just wanted to kind of kill them, obviously. So we thought they were pretty cool. I think.
Joey's great, but he's kind of like, hey, how you doing? Hey,
Yeah.
you know, and he's not exactly fluent in French.
No
Now,
bad thing.
the summer of '91 was a real, I guess, turning point for the band. It just went out there and everybody got their act together, toured, and then there's record company offers. It seemed to.
We
I
didn't
was
actually
very-
tour.
We had
weren't they like showcase dates?
We did.
there
Well,
were
they weren't.
4 shows in Oxford.
4 shows in
That's
Oxford.
it?
Yeah.
And before then we'd never played in public apart from
Yeah. 2
school once and stuff like that.
Oh, I thought it was like a planned out, stopping off in Bristol,
No,
Wales,
definitely
near
not.
Bradford, all over kind of.
We just played in Oxford. Our whole thing was that, we wanted to get a following in Oxford, and
And we were in the enviable position of getting more than 2 record companies interested, because as soon as that happens, then you get 30 interested, most of which have never heard a note of your music, but want to make sure they don't miss out on anything, and they're basically following all the others.
Now, how come the band never relocated to London? Did you feel you would get lost in London, kind of?
it was. I remember when we were there was a record label who were interested, and it was at the time that summer of '91, and it kind of typified everything. This woman said typified everything I think we thought about London. She said, I said, you know, have you heard the tape and everything? This before we had management. She said, yeah, and she said, but you know, you don't have to worry about demo tapes. You want to just hang out at this club where all these indie bands go, and then you'll get signed up. And it's just like, and this club is in London. And it's like that's the last thing. You know, we never felt comfortable with it. We didn't, you know, that we don't feel. You know, there are very few bands that we feel actually comfortable with, because there are a lot of bands out there who pretty boring and stupid, you know, and particularly this whole thing about the scene, and you know, it's very London centric, and plus the fact our friends are in Oxford, and we've kind of, apart from going away to college, we've always lived around there. And there didn't seem any reason to move. It just seems more life isn't as good in London, you know, traffic, air, all those things.
Yeah, I'm not sure the other bands. It's not that they're stupid, but more than that they're just.
Yeah, that's a bit harsh.
They're into the music for other things. Some of them are into the kind of the intellectual idea of being in a band and the situationless kind of subversion that entails, which is great. I mean, it can lead to great interviews and a great idea for a band, but we just want to make a few good records really, and then get out.
Was success in the States ever important to you guys, or if it happened, it happened? I mean,
Well, the first record, everyone was telling us how important it was that it was happening, but for this record, we've got no expectations. That's for certain, because I think the terms crossed over into a frighteningly diverse amount of people. We'd even have people turning up at our live shows when we were touring Creep, and they'd leave after Creep, like 5-10 people every night, and so we'd get some of the crew to stop them and ask them, why are you going? I mean, do you hate the rest of the songs or something? And luckily or unluckily, they were saying, well, no, we do this to all bands. You know, we saw Nirvana last week and left after Teenage Spirit because Smells Like Teen Spirit because we sort of don't like live bands, but we watch MTV and we know the single, and so there's this whole kind of bizarre crowd of people who obviously sort of were into our music, which is great, but possibly not a very accurate sort of.
I mean, I think there is a generation of some fans that are just very, you know, not single-oriented, but, you know, they know a band from a video, but it seems to be that the ones that are interested find out more about the band, you know, they'll pick up the EP, you know, they'll pick up Pablo Honey, you know, if they like this. So it seems to be like with your fans. Now with just to touch on Pablo Honey briefly, now that was made in 3 weeks. So when you were the songs written also very quickly for that?
No, that was part of the problem. There were songs that had been recorded arguably better
Yeah.
earlier on when we were still on a Friday, and it was that kind of nightmare situation of being a band, a professional band, and having this limited time to record already quite old songs, which would have been fine, but the plan was to tour in England once and then do the second album, and things kind of got stretched and put into stasis by the success.
It's kind of like a collection of our greatest hits as an unsigned band, or our supposed greatest hits.
It's something we wanted to release, and then kind of, now we had free time to rehearse and didn't have to do rubbish jobs anymore. We kind of figured we could start writing really good songs. Something we've only just had a chance to record, really.
One artist I talked to kind of phrased it like he had his whole first 25 years to prepare for that first album, and then the second one in between touring and the next album a few months. It's a very weird thing to reconcile.
Although that's, in a way, that's fine for us. These songs were written so quickly, and we're the kind of band who would, before we were signed, we were writing songs every week, so sometimes they were very bad.
Now you guys toured a lot, as you said when we first started talking today. You could have probably be continuing touring on the recognition of Pablo Honey, specifically Creep. Do you have any memorable performances that stand out, or maybe a strange incident that happened on the road?
Strange things seem to happen in Canada.
Family
for
radio.
us.
Vancouver.
In Vancouver, we played on a revolving stage, in this outdoor kind of theme park, which was obviously very bizarre, especially being the kind of band that doesn't look up very much. So on the brief occasions you did look up, it just looked as if the whole audience had got up and moved 100 metres to the left, and we're just kind of going round and round while playing, which was fairly strange. And that very same week, we played a show in Toronto, and some man grabbed me on the way to the stage and said, "Quick, write on my arm, write something on my arm, write your name on my arm," which sort of happens sometimes, but it's a fairly bizarre thing. So I scribbled what vaguely looked like my name, but not really, and went and played the gig. And the following night, he turned up to the next show, which not only was that 300 miles away, which was quite an alarming thing for him to be doing, he also rolled up his sleeve, and he'd had it tattooed on. And it didn't even look like my signature, worst of all. It didn't look like anybody. He could have got Tom to do something vaguely kind of artistic.
I was going to say that. I bet he was going to get a tattoo of your signature.
Disaster.
And he did that
I know.
the next day.
Terrible.
Well, this person,
What do you say? You can't sort of tell him it was a mistake. You say, "Oh, well, great," you know.
You're delighted you feigned delight.
he will probably, maybe he's going to show up and get the whole band on each arm or something. That is very strange. That's very strange. Do you remember the first time you heard yourself on the radio?
Yeah.
It was back home or here?
It was back
Prove
home.
yourself.
Because I'm not a musician, but I would think that as a musician it kind of solidifies that, this is real now.
Well, it was
this exists.
Because I had it on a tape deck cassette recorder, and it's very strange. You have to keep opening the cassette to make sure there's nothing going around. It's very bizarre to have this kind of box with nothing physically moving, but your music's coming out of it. It's hard to explain, but it's a very strange feeling. No, very weird.
It was, we were completely excited. It was a mainstream weekend DJ on the national radio station, and we heard it because it was great in Oxford at the time, and still is. We've got a lot of friends there, and someone phoned us up and said, "You played at 8 o'clock this morning on the radio, and they're going to play it again on Sunday." So it's like we all tuned in, listened to it. It was wonderful.
For the American audiences that haven't seen the live show yet, will you be touring this summer?
Yeah, we're going to come back in May and June and do some club dates for about 3-4 weeks. But that'll be the first tour, and there'll be others. We'll be back.
What can we expect? Your lasers and smoke
Oh no,
and
no. Hopefully not.
Pieces.
There's a great
Leather.
our guitar tech Plank. He used to work with Wasp, and he said that is it Blackie Lawless of Wasp? He used to have an exploding codpiece, and one night it imploded. So we're not going to be doing anything like that.
No.
Thankfully, no. It's just it's difficult to explain really. We just gimmick free.
That is absolutely true, because I did some writing for Kerrang and all that.
Right.
And Blackie relayed that story.
Right.
So.
Yes. We'll leave the pyrotechnics for Blackie.
Okay, it's great. It's everything I wanted to